Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video for today. I hope you're all having a wonderful weekend so far. So of course, I have to talk again about Alphabet, Google, but in this case, I do want to talk about the other side of the coin, right? I'm very bullish on this company. Yes, I still see it as undervalued, but of course, even if I'm bullish, I have to know the other side of the story, okay? Now, I know a lot of people will look at just some pricing metrics here. So for example, here if we look at the PE for Google, Alphabet, 20 times trailing earnings, right? If you look at the forward one, 19.5 times. Oh, super cheap. Okay, first of all, it's true. It is cheap. But don't forget that historically, Google has been trading at around 23, 24 times earnings. Okay, so yes, it is cheap. It is lower than I believe the 10-year average. But it was never something that traded closer to 30 times, like an Apple, for example, or even a Microsoft was also high up there in the 20s. So yes, Google has always been cheap for various reasons. Now you might say, maybe earnings is not really the metric I want to look at. Maybe it's price to free cash flow. Trailing price to free cash flow here, 29.2 times. Forward one, 26.7 times. Already more than earnings, okay? In this case, on average, we were a little bit lower. Okay, so right now, and I'll show you why this is happening. Actually, I'll already tell you right now, it's because of, well, increase in CapEx. And so free cash flow has come down a little bit, especially free cash flow margin. But for a company like Alphabet, I do think that, yes, maybe free cash flow might be a metric that you'd want to follow a little bit closer. That's not all. We're going to talk about a lot of data points throughout this video. Search data, data from OpenAI, from web searches, etc., etc. Of course, we always have to look at both sides of the story, especially when you are bullish, because you don't want to be a blind bull. So before continuing, if you enjoy this type of videos, hit all the buttons, especially the subscribe one. We're on our way to reach 100,000 subscribers pretty soon, so do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Really appreciate that. If you want to support me even further, do check out the link down in the description and in the pinned comment with the top 10 best stocks to buy now, or go to fool.com/couchinvestor. Thank you very much. And also a special thanks to, of course, the channel partner and live stream partner, Fiscal.ai, which is basically the platform that you're seeing here, right here, stock research platform that you've seen time and time again. Now, I do want to go back here to the latest meeting that they had, right? So you can go just to transcript here and just click on the AI summary if you don't want to read the whole transcript or listen to it. And by the way, you can do this for every single thing here for Alphabet and all the other companies as well. Now, important things here. One, search still saw continued double-digit revenue growth in Q1 2025. And this is, of course, 2 years after ChatGPT came out, right? Not only ChatGPT, all the others of the last years that have risen in popularity, whether it's Claude, Grok, even Gemini, Perplexity, right? All of these things didn't come out in the last couple of months. No, they came out already a year, 2 years ago. Now, of course, you might say, yeah, but it's still early days. And I agree. It's still early days. And despite it being early days, you already see, well, ChatGPT, OpenAI go up in the rankings, especially with web visits and stuff like that, already in the top 20 and actually beating websites like Wikipedia, for example. They also told us that cloud is growing rapidly with leadership in infrastructure and agents. We've had, of course, the stories of OpenAI using Google Cloud and maybe using also TPUs, but the TPU part of the story was basically, yes, they're testing out the TPUs, but I mean, that's normal. You test it out, but they're still not using it at scale. But the Google Cloud part of that story is still true, and that's still also very, very important, as I'll explain in just a bit. YouTube subscriptions surpassed 270 million paid subscriptions. They've seen 480 trillion monthly tokens that are being processed, 50 times increase in just 1 year. So tremendous data that was provided to us at the start of June. They told us again, Gemini app has over 400 million monthly active users. AI overviews have successfully scaled to 1.5 billion monthly users, and Waymo One has served over 10 million fully autonomous rides. Of course, I would like to get as much updated data in the upcoming earnings report and earnings call, because I think that could change the narrative here. And I'll talk about the narrative in just a bit. focusing, of course, on the biggest chunk of their business here, and that's Google search, right? That's basically the other side of the coin when it comes to bulls versus bear. Bulls think, myself included, that this can continue to go up and to the right, okay? I agree. I think this can go up and to the right, but it might experience a slowdown. It might, because remember, search is changing. Okay, when you search right now on Google, you of course get your AI overviews. Okay, you don't have to go click on other things. You can, but you don't have to. AI overviews is basically an equivalent of, well, it's powered by Gemini. So it's the equivalent of talking to a chatbot because it basically answers like a chatbot. Me, for example, when I go on Chrome, I go to the search bar at the top. My queries have become, of course, much longer. My queries have actually become the same as when I go on Gemini, whether it's on my phone or sometimes on Perplexity as well. Long form queries. Same thing here with the search box, and it's working. So why not? And as long as they can monetize it at the same rate as standard search, then I don't see why this could not go up and to the right. Of course, if they cannot, if there suddenly is such a huge shift of, well, standard search and of course an advertising hit, then yes, of course, this big segment right here can get hit. And that's the narrative, that's the fear right now. And by the way, all of these data points that you see right here and throughout the video can be available to you on fiscal.ai, link in the description and in the pinned comment. You'll get 15% off. New users do get Fiscal Pro 2 weeks for free, so do check them out. If you missed my last video when I included Google, which is probably every other video nowadays, I see the catalyst as follows. 1, earnings report. Cloud growth should reaccelerate, more demand than they can serve. Gemini usage, some data on that would be great. Search query growth, as we've seen, I would like to hear a bit more commentary on that. And then that could lead, of course, to a narrative shift that, oh, actually, Google is not struggling. Google, thanks to AI, thanks to Gemini, are actually taking share in this expanding search market. Also, by the way, if you missed this data point, Google is more profitable than Microsoft and Apple, making it the most profitable company out there. Now, we've talked about Google search part, right? That has gone up over 2.2, 2.3x or so, I believe, over the past 8 years or so. But if you look at all the other segments of Google's business, so YouTube, Google Network, Google Subscription, Google Cloud, other bets, and there here, small part here, hedging gains, you can see that that has gone up by over 7x over the past 10 years. And that's the thing. When you buy Google today, of course, the biggest chunk here is still Google search. But all of the other parts of the business have been growing much faster than this. And I still expect YouTube ads to be an extremely big business for them, Google Cloud to be an extremely big business revenue-wise and profit-wise for the business in the future. And so, yes, while I agree that Google search, right, the search empire, the search industry is forever changing, and that's the biggest risk right now, that it could potentially in the future hurt Google's basically money printing machine, I don't see why the majority of people are still ignoring all the other parts of Google's business. To me, it just doesn't make much sense. Yes, again, this is a $50 billion business, the Google search business growing close to 10% quarter over quarter. But YouTube ads is also growing over 10% quarter over quarter. Yes, okay, this is generating around $9 billion or so a quarter. But Google Cloud is growing closer to 30%, $12.2 billion a quarter, and should be accelerating. They said they are capacity constrained, which means if they had more capacity, that number would have been much bigger. And I expect that number actually to be much bigger in the future. Currently, the operating margin for Google Cloud is 17.8%, still far away from AWS, right? AWS sits right now, the last quarter, 39.5%. So still far away from that. Of course, AWS, I mean, over $100 billion in revenue on an annual basis. You have here Microsoft Cloud. It's not Azure only, it's the whole of Intelligent Cloud. That's also very high, 41.5%. So Google Cloud, as you can see, still early days. And in my eyes, whatever the impact will be on search will be balanced out, and maybe even more, with all the other businesses out there, whether it's Google subscriptions, YouTube, and especially a Google Cloud. Now, going into more data that we've got over the last couple of weeks. So first up, according to Yipit, Gemini added 13 million users in May versus April, which is the highest sequential growth in the category, indicative of share gain. ChatGPT added 5 million users. Most of the rest were flat to slightly down. So again, as Google rolls out Gemini and Gemini AI overviews and AI mode as well, and users see that, oh, actually, Google, something I've been using for years and decades, is actually perfect. I don't need to go to another website. I don't need to download another app. No, Google Gemini does exactly what I need. And so you will see increase of usage in Gemini over time. You'll see increase of usage of actually AI overviews, because why would you go to another website first and then start asking questions if you can just ask the question in your traditional search box at the top of your browser? Just plain and easy. Of course, there are various reasons why you will go to a Gemini, to a Grok, to a Perplexity, to a ChatGPT, right? If you're a coder, if you need specific things, specific workloads, whatever, yes, of course, then you will go to those applications. But that's when Gemini has to do its work. That's what Gemini 2.5 Pro, which is still the leading model right now in the market, should be providing you with the best service. If it doesn't, then yes, then that's Google's mistake. Now, if we look here at America's most visited websites, look at the top two, Google, YouTube, combined. Combined, this is more than all the rest here, right? This is not a joke. This is not a joke. But of course, look at ChatGPT. ChatGPT came out at the end of 2022, let's say 2023, so what's 2.5 years or so, already surpassing websites like Wikipedia, not surprising, LinkedIn. And it's probably going to make its way in the billions pretty soon. Moving on here to some more data from SimilarWeb here, month-over-month growth in total visits to Google's AI domain. So we have here Gemini, NotebookLM, AI.Google, Labs.Google, and DeepMind.Google. As you can see, month-over-month growth across the board has been quite impressive. And if we look at, and this I've shown you before, if you look at the top recipient of AI chatbot traffic, funny enough, the number one here by far is youtube.com, which is the website and the app you're now on because you're watching my video on YouTube, and I appreciate that very much. Then we've got more data coming out of SimilarWeb here. So over the last 12 months, 95.8% of ChatGPT users visited Google, while only 9.8% of Google users visited ChatGPT. Now, okay, this might sound very good, but look at this. Maybe I'll just remove myself right here. Look at this. Share of Google users who also visit ChatGPT has increased over the past couple of months. And then when you look at the other side of the coin here again, share of ChatGPT users who also visit Google, that has come down, although we've seen a little increase here in the last 2 months or so. But still, this is, of course, the other side of the coin. This is the risk that more and more people will use ChatGPT and will not have to visit Google, for example. Or more people that use Google will just be using ChatGPT. Of course, one goes hand in hand here. But what is very important still is that, well, the share here is still above 94% of ChatGPT users still visit Google. So even if that declines, you're still in 90%, which, I mean, that gives them quite a lot of flexibility and probably quite a lot of time to actually make sure that, well, people know that Gemini is good enough and actually much better at the moment. Then, moving on to some more data here. Daily total visits to leading Gen AI websites. As you can see, Gemini here compared to DeepSeek, Grok, Perplexity, and Claude, still far well more than the rest. And we've seen here a peak back in June. This was, I think, when ChatGPT had an issue. What's funny also, this is exactly when ChatGPT also peaked. And of course, you can see the huge difference between a Gemini, for example, and the daily visits to ChatGPT's website, night and day. Now, what we've also seen, and that's bad basically for, well, most of the websites on the web, and this has been something that has been talked about before, right? Since the launch of AI overviews, we've seen a big increase here in zero-click share, basically an increase of 13%, and then a big decrease in organic traffic to news sites. Basically, yes, people do not click on links anymore. Well, let me rephrase that. Still a lot of people do it, but fewer than before. We've also gotten some information from a Deutsche Bank analyst, said the following. Digital ad spend was strong for his clients in the second quarter, up 18% year over year. Google search growth is above expectations as additional use cases and increased data sources, such as from CRM integrations, improve targeting. So again, search is evolving. Search is changing. Of course, the fear at first, especially when Bard was launched, was that, oh, Google was late to the party. Google is now trying to catch up and then they'll never get there and ChatGPT will just destroy their huge dominance. Well, in 2025, I think it is proving that thesis completely wrong. And of course, they'll have to continue to innovate. They'll have to continue to come out with great features and not lose market share, right? That's the main thing here. But the big advantage that a company like, of course, Google has is that, well, they are printing money, whereas all the other players, yes, they might be growing much faster than Google because they're much smaller, but they're all burning a lot of cash. Another interesting thing that we've seen before, Google's scale and traffic has continued to gradually grow and is 9 times that of the nearest competitor, which is ChatGPT. Of course, ChatGPT has gone up more recently, much faster than Google, but as you can see here, Google search traffic has continued to go up and up. We've seen actually Google take some share when it comes to e-commerce from an Amazon, for example. I've shown you this in other videos. Now, one thing I want to see improve is, of course, free cash flow margin for the business. That one has peaked here in 2021 at 26%. Since then, we've been in the low 20s. Now, why is that? Well, you've seen here a huge increase in CapEx. Now, despite the huge increase in CapEx, that didn't stop, of course, free cash flow to grow. But if you look at free cash flow margin, hopefully, I mean, CapEx is not going to increase that much more. It can still be very, very large, but we hope to see that free cash flow margin is going to go back to those 25%, which would be, of course, great. Now, as I said at the start of this video, price to free cash flow, whether it's forward or trailing, is above the 10-year average. So it's not, oh, super cheap on that metric. No, it is a little bit above it. Yes, price to earnings, it is below. Price to free cash flow, which is what you want to see from a company like Google, basically, is to print out billions and billions in free cash flow. On the other side, one last thing here, and that's operating margin. As you can see, operating margin over the last 12 months has continued to go up and up and up after the bottom. Well, the most recent bottom was here, Q1 2023, was at 25.4%. We're now closer to 33.2% and rising. Oh, one extra thing here, and that's of course a question for next year when this acquisition will be approved or not. Google Cloud and with, of course, that huge acquisition, $32 billion. Since it is such a big acquisition, the integration time and all of that remains to be seen how fast they can do it. So that's also, let's say, a risk, a question mark you should know. And so to conclude, yes, it is an undervalued business. Yes, it is a business that is still growing across the board. And yes, it is a business that potentially could face some big disruptions in their main business at the moment, which is this search business, right? $50 billion per quarter, pretty big number. But despite that, even if they were to lose $1 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion from that business, I do think that all the other businesses will just balance that hit out. Maybe I'll be completely wrong, but so far I've been proven right when it comes to Google. I've been proven right because search is growing. They still make a lot of money from it. It's still going up and to the right, might not be growing as fast as previously, but so far I see no cracks in that business. I have to know about the potential risk 100%. But until I actually see the data that shows me that, oh, this is a struggling business, I don't see why I should change my mind. And so all in all, that's about it for me in this video. Hopefully you found this a useful one. Lots of data, lots of both sides of the aisle, let's say here. If you have solid arguments, do let me know down in the comment section below. Do check out fiscal.ai, link is down in the description, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.